Hello viewers, welcome back to our YouTube channel, and today we want to proceed with our series on quantitative techniques. And today we want to look at the methods of getting primary data. We had discussed about the different types of data, and we had looked at primary. We had finished the discrete and continuous data, and now we had started on primary data and wanted to get the difference between the primary data and the secondary data. And as a precursor to what we've discussed, we looked at primary data as data that is collected from original sources using methods like surveys, interviews, questionnaires, observations, experiments, and of course those were some of the approaches that would help us to get the first-hand information that is highly reliable and tailored to the specific research needs or the objectives of the researcher. And now we want to start off by looking at the different methodologies or the different methods that we can use to make sure that we gather the primary data well. So today is 18th. Today is 18th. Today is 18th. 18th June 2026. So we want to look at the methods. The methods of getting primary data. Primary data. So how can we be able to collect the primary data? So those are the methods that we want to look at. The first method is, I had highlighted the methods, but I wanted to start off with the questionnaire as one of the methods that can be used to collect primary data. So a questionnaire or questionnaires, this is a research instrument. This is a research instrument consisting of a sequence of questions, consisting of a sequence of questions and other prompts for the purpose of collecting information, So it is a research instrument consisting of a sequence of questions and other prompts for purposes of collecting information from the respondents. For purposes of collecting information from respondents. For the purpose of collecting information from respondents. So the questionnaire translates the research objectives into specific questions. So it just translates the research objective or what the researcher is trying to find out into specific questions that are intended to capture the information that is going to be used in the research. So the answers to those specific questions provide the relevant data for drawing conclusions or drawing inferences about a given research topic. So the questions relate to the problem of inquiry either directly or indirectly. So those questions, they could be, some of them could be directly related to the problem of inquiry, or it could be a little bit off the topic of discussion, but maybe it is intended to capture additional information. So the questionnaires should consist of a note, and that note should briefly explain the aims and objectives of the inquiry. So the questionnaire should consist a note briefly explaining the aims and objectives of the inquiry, so that people don't get worried and end up giving you wrong information. So the researcher should ensure the secrecy of the information as well as the details. For example, the name of the respondent, if maybe it's required. Because you are going to get this information and some people may feel not comfortable giving you the information. That's why it is very important for you to put a note that explains why you are covering the information or why you are gathering the information and what you are going to do with the information that you are gathering. Because without you doing that, these respondents are actually going to give you wrong information that will end up making your research not make any sense, because they will give you wrong information. At the end of the day, you will end up making wrong conclusions. So it is always important for you to make sure that the questions you ask, they don't necessarily deviate away from so much in deviating away from what you are trying to achieve. And you should make sure that the information you have gotten from the researcher, you keep some secrecy. You don't just dispose of the information that you have required. For example, if maybe you have gotten a very sensitive information from a respondent, at some point it is always up to the researcher to make sure that the secrecy of maybe the names of the person whom have given them information is not given out, depending on the nature of the information that they have received. So a questionnaire is just a set of written questions designed to collect information directly from the respondents. So it is just a structured written questions. It is just structured with fixed questions, and those questions have options. Of course, most of the times these could be, if it is structured, most of the times it is going to have fixed questions with options. Maybe they are objective questions. You have a question, maybe it is asking about the religion, maybe which religion do you belong to, then they give options. One, maybe objective number one, maybe it is Catholic. Part B, maybe it is maybe Islam. Then the other one, they can put Protestant, Anglican, depending on the different options that the researchers put. But at some point, these questionnaires may be unstructured, which we call the open-ended questions. So before we look at the types, someone may wonder, because we are basically giving this information to the students. They may be wondering what could be some of the things that can prompt them maybe to use a questionnaire. Of course, for example, we can assume that maybe we are taking a classroom survey. Maybe a teacher gives a student a questionnaire, and the teacher or the lecturer is trying to ask about their favorite subjects and maybe their study habits. So that's when we can have some questions, maybe they are structured. You put your favorite subject, and then maybe the study habits that maybe sometimes you find maybe someone prefers to study at night than studying in the morning, or revising in the morning, early morning before coming for lectures. So you find that this person is actually the person who is trying to find out that information, maybe trying to get what is the appropriate time for these people to actually give them maybe a test or an assignment. Because if you ask about maybe how the students prefer to study or their study habits, and you find that maybe they prefer to, when they have just had a topic that has been discussed on, then they go ahead to do some revision. Depending on the responses and how students study, you can tell that at such and such times maybe the students are going to be ready. So that maybe you inform them in advance that we are going to have a test, so that they can be able to arrange themselves and maybe study. If let's say we have maybe it's just a school project, and maybe students design questionnaires to find out how many maybe classmates use social media maybe on a daily basis. It could be just a classroom project whereby you are trying to find out how many students do use maybe social media platform on a daily basis. Of course, that will tell you, depending on maybe the time they stay on the internet or using the social media platforms, will give you a very good information about the study habits of such and such students. The other example that we can look at, maybe if we are carrying out a community study, and maybe you find that the learners, they distribute questionnaires in their neighborhood to understand the attitude maybe towards recycling. So depending on whatever topic of study that you are trying to find out, you always check out you distribute questionnaires. They could be structured. Of course, we are going to look at some of the types of questionnaires, but as I told you, one of them could be structured, whereby you have typed questions with objective answers, where someone selects maybe strongly agree, doesn't agree, those kind of questioning. Or they could be unstructured, whereby they are open-ended. You ask you ask questions as you write down what the people are actually responding to. So let's look at maybe some of the types of questionnaires. Types of questionnaires. Types of questionnaires. Of course, we have what we call the self-administered questionnaires. Self-administered questionnaires. Self-administered questionnaires. Of course, among the self-administered questionnaires, we can have things like the mail or postal. We can call it postal questionnaires. whereby you drop the information through mail. Those questions you send them via mail, or you via their postal address. You get their box numbers, then you start putting the information through the box address, whereby people can actually pick that information and then respond to, then put it back, and then you can be able to pick it out. It could be, of course, the self-administered could be from maybe online questionnaires. Most of the times these days they are using online questionnaires. Someone sends you a survey and they have pre-typed the question, you just keep on answering. Questionnaires. And the other could be delivery and collection questionnaires. Collection questionnaires. Of course, these ones you deliver the questions to a specific place or a specific location, then you leave them with the questions. They fill the questions, the respondents fill the questions, then they call you and go back and pick the field or the answered questions. So that is one of the types of questionnaires, the self-administered questionnaires. Then the second one we can talk about, is maybe what we call the interviewer administration questionnaires. The interviewer, or what we call the interviewer administered questionnaires. Interviewer administration questionnaires. Now, what are these ones? Of course, you are seeing that there is an interviewer administered questionnaires. Of course, examples of some of these we can have maybe the telephone questionnaires, or what you call interview interview schedules. So this is for telephone questionnaires. Of course, you give someone a call. Maybe you give the prospective respondent a call. You ask them some questions and they answer the questions there and then. That's a telephone questionnaires. Of course, you can also have interviews, like we have seen on very many television sets. They always get interviews. You find that they have that one-on-one conversation with the respondent, maybe the presenter and maybe someone from whatever information they are trying to gather from the respondent. You find that they are asking structured questions, or the questions can be structured before the interview, or questions can be posed based on the kind of information the researcher is trying to look for. You ask information that may not be, you ask questions that may not be directly related to the topic under discussion, but they are trying to maybe to capture as more information or as more detailed information as they can about a given topic. So that's the kind of questionnaires that we have. We have the self-administered questionnaires and then the interviewer administration questionnaires. Of course, you will find that there are others, as I talked about, the open-ended questionnaires. Of course, the open-ended questionnaires, those are the ones whereby they have a free response. you ask a question, then the respondent chooses what to tell you. So those are the open-ended. For example, the open-ended kind of questionnaire that we can have, maybe at the students. Of course, you can ask students, explain how you prepare for exams. That is a very subjective. They are students who don't actually read, and they just understand when maybe they're attending lectures. There are students who actually attend lectures, and at some point they have to read by themselves for them to be able to grasp the concepts. There are students who just understand the things by themselves, that even when they attend lectures, they don't understand, that even when they try to read, they don't understand, but they try to understand some of those things by themselves. They find ways of understanding. So it is very subjective. That's why they call them open-ended. Anything can be, someone can tell you anything. So you just give someone a topic, then they give you whatever they think, and it doesn't necessarily mean that what they think is actually right. Then the other one, we can have what we call the close-ended questionnaires. Close-ended questionnaires, these are the ones that are fixed. You have questions and they are just objectives. Maybe they could actually be yes or no answers. Those are the ones that are basically used maybe in courts of law. They always tell you yes or no. It's either yes or no. Such kind of, maybe some investigation they are trying to find out. Of course, they can give you, for some of the examples they can tell you is, if maybe it is within the education setting, you can ask maybe students, whether do they actually like the group courseworks or the group work. It is either a yes or no. So such kind of questionnaires, whereby you just expect someone to say yes or no, or to just tick yes or no. So the other one, of course, it looks at the mixed questionnaires, of course, where you have both styles. You can say yes, then you explain why you're saying yes, or you can say no, then you add an explanation. So these are some of the, actually for the mixed one, it is more within these people who want these ratings. They can tell you rate maybe from 1 to 5 on average. Rate from maybe 1 to 5. Then you start rating that. Maybe I'm giving this one a 4 out of 5, maybe a 10, maybe a 10 out of 10, maybe a 5 out of 5, depending on, of course, when you're saying I'm giving this person maybe 10 out of 10, most of the times these people go ahead to explain why they are giving 10 out of 10, depending on the criteria, or they give the criteria through which they use to mark maybe someone right or wrong. So those are some of the things that we can talk about as far as the questionnaire, the types of questionnaires, and then the kind of just getting the definition of a questionnaire. We've just said these are just sequence of questions. The reason that's why we are saying sequence of questions is that these questions follow each other. Just from a normal communication, if I'm structuring some question, maybe I can start by greeting someone. When I greet you, maybe the next thing I ask, maybe your name. Then me coming to get information from you, then I start with the topic, then let alone I greet you. Doesn't really make any sense. So that's why we are saying sequence, that these questions, they are not in a chronological order, but they are trying to be in a chronological order depending on what information the respondent or the researcher expects from the respondent. I hope you are getting the argument. It's not all that a complicated stuff, but what we have to understand is that these questionnaires are always written questions, but the mode of how you are going to transfer these questionnaires to the respondent so that you can be able to get the information may actually differ. It could be a telephone, it could be an interview, it could be through their email addresses, and other kind of mode of delivery. So I want us to look at what are some of the advantages of or the merits of questionnaires, of using questionnaires as a method of collecting information for the first time. Then once we are done with that, we shall get also the disadvantages, and then we proceed to look at the guidelines for constructing questionnaires, because it is very important for you to know what should and shouldn't be included when you are structuring questions. So let's look at the advantages or merits. Advantages of questionnaires. Advantages of questionnaires. Of course, one of them, they usually have standardized answers. Standardized answers that makes it simple to compile data. That makes it simple to compile data. Of course, most of the times, as I told you, they are always multiple choice questions. So since they are multiple choice, what I only need to know is how many people have answered yes, or how many have said no to a particular aspect. So how many have ticked maybe strongly agree with a given kind of situation or a given question, and how many have said maybe strongly disagree, or it's a moderate, depending on how you have structured the question. So that's why we are saying they always have a standardized answers that help researchers to carry out their intended objective. Because if I've put a yes or a no to a question that maybe requires on the study habits of the students, if someone says me, I prefer to study at night, and maybe in the preceding question I asked about how many students prefer, those who prefer social media, and someone ticked yes, I prefer social media, and maybe in the sequential question I asked at what time do you spend on social media, you find that if I try to analyze all this, someone said I spend more hours on social media, I also prefer social media, then when it comes to study time, they say we always want to study at night. But you find that within the study time, someone already gave you an answer that he prefers to, he always on social media, maybe the whole day. So it means this person is actually not reading. So you can easily make conclusions, because these solutions are always they are structured. It's just a matter of what the response is, then you can be able to draw the conclusion, because the conclusions, they are kind of known depending on how the respondent has answered the kind of question that you have set out. So that's our point number one. Point number two, they don't require as much effort from the questionnaire as verbal or telephone surveys. They do not require as much. It doesn't say that it doesn't require much effort, but as much effort from the from the questionnaire or the questioner as verbal or telephone survey. So you may actually get information minus putting in so much effort, because someone is just going to say a yes or a no depending on the question that you have posed, and you will be good to go. Then the other thing, since you are not putting in more effort, it means you are also not putting in more money. It is very economical. Very economical. Very economical in terms of time. In terms of time, energy, and money. Since you are not going to spend a lot of time explaining to someone what they should, why they should have maybe to first think of their answers before they just provide the answers. Then the other thing is that it's widely used. It's widely used when the scope of inquiry is large. For example, if let's say I'm studying a population of, let's say, 45 million. Let's say I'm studying the whole country. So this population is very large. So if I want to get a quicker information, I have to develop these questionnaires whereby someone just says yes or no, and I move to the next person. So they will be very easy to answer on the side of the respondent, but at the same time, it saves more time or at the side of the researcher, so that they can gain more time to get very many people. So as long as the population is so much large, then you have to use the questionnaire to be able to manage it easily. So that's why we are saying it is widely used when the scope of the inquiry is large. Then the last one that we can think of is maybe data collection by this method is not affected by personal bias. Personal bias of the researcher. Data collected by this method. Data collected by this method is not affected by the personal bias of the researcher, because I could be gathering information, and maybe I just look at someone and I be biased about the person, maybe depending on how the person dresses, depending on how I may not necessarily get the information that I would have gotten if at all I were using another methods, because I'm going to be biased about someone and I'm going to ask questions which are also biased. But even when I'm biased, I only give out the questionnaires to people just for them to fill. So my biasness as a researcher will not affect the information I'm collecting. So that's why we are saying it's an advantage, because we are getting the information without our biasness as researchers. The other aspect that we can talk about is, of course, we said we have a standardized response. We said it is cost effective. We said it can be used to collect information from larger areas. Of course, those can be enough. Let's look at the rest. You can brainstorm and also add in some if you like. But those, even if they come in the question, they will not require much more than 5 as we have given. So let's look at the demerits or the disadvantages. Demerits of questionnaires as a method of collecting first-hand information, or what we call primary data. So the first one, they are sharply limited by the fact that the respondents must be able to read and respond to the questionnaires. So if you are dealing with a population which is full of illiterates who can't read, who can't understand the language in which those questionnaires are drafted, then the people will just tick when they don't actually know what they have ticked. So it will affect. So that's why we are saying the questionnaires are sharply limited by the fact that the respondents must be able to read the questions, and respond to them. So even this one also goes ahead on the side of the even if there were interviews, as long as the people don't actually understand the language you are speaking, they are going to be affected. So if they don't understand the questions, just they will not be able to respond. So the questioner or the person or the researcher may have a problem in question construction and then the wording. So wording, those respondents may give varying answers. So the questioner may have a problem in question construction. Questioner may have a problem in question construction and wording those respondents may give varying answers. So if of course we are going to look at the general guidelines for drafting questionnaires, maybe we shall understand that from there, but just know that would be a challenge. The last one that we can think of is that the respondents may not be cooperative and honest, hence affecting the accuracy of the information, collected. I told you, just take for instance, if let's say you are trying to find out maybe the income levels of different households, maybe in let's say in any division of Kampala, let's say in Kawempe. Now what is going to happen is that people will be sensitive about their income levels. They will not tell you the truth about how much they earn, about how much they spend, because they will, most of them will fear that maybe if I tell this person the correct information, then maybe URA can come after me. The tax authorities can come after me, and thus they end up not disclosing the exact income. And when they have not disclosed their exact income, if let's say you have been trying to carry out a research about income inequality, you are going to end up with the wrong report, because these people will not tell you exactly how much they earn, because they are not sure of what can be done with the information that they have distributed to you or they have given to you. Even when they are sure that maybe this is just for study purposes, someone will say, what if another person reads that information? What will happen? Or what if someone in the authority picks interest in the information that you have that I'm giving out? What will happen? So those are some of the things that make the respondents not to give you the right information. And as long as these people are not cooperative, they are not cooperating with you. And most of the times for you, the researcher, you may not actually know, because you will not know that this person is actually lying about how much they earn. Because it will be hard for you to do what? To verify that information that they have given to you. You can't access their bank statements. And when someone just tells you, I earn such and such amount, they are not going to prove it. So that's how you find that the information is going to be affected. So, of course, some of the limitations of this questionnaire thing is that we might have some low response rates. People may not actually respond. You may give questionnaires and someone just throws at. Maybe you have sent it on email, someone that didn't even read the email for a full week. So there is always a delay. We end up getting less response than the questionnaires that we have distributed. That's why it is more preferable to always send out very many forms. If I've delivered maybe a hand, I also send on an email. By any chance, whatever gets responded to first, maybe I'm sure that at least I'm increasing the response rate. Of course, there is also misinterpretation, whereby the respondents may misunderstand the question and then they end up giving you wrong things. Of course, at some point it will be hard for you to know that actually the respondent didn't understand what question maybe we wrote or what it meant. Then, of course, we also have what we call superficial answers. Superficial answers, these are the answers you get without any explanation. You don't have, they are limited in their explanation. They are just yes or no. But someone doesn't tell you why he said yes, why he says no. So they are superficial answers. So those are some of the limitations. The limitations of questionnaires. So now let's now look at the guidelines. I think this is where that I want you to be very careful. The general guidelines for questionnaire construction. So what do you need to know before you draft a questionnaire? Those are the guidelines that we are talking about. One is use of clear and comprehensive wording, which are understandable, which are understandable for all educational levels. You don't use complicated language or complicated words or ambiguous words, words that have so many meanings, whereby someone cannot understand what exactly you meant. Remember, some of these things, people are going to receive some of these questionnaires when you are not there to explain what you meant. So, as you are formulating these questionnaires, make sure you use a clear and comprehensive wording. You choose your words carefully and you be clear on what they mean, so that we avoid the ambiguity or having so many meanings, and which may end up confusing the respondent. Because the moment the respondent starts to ask, maybe what was he saying when he said such and such statement. So the moment that comes to the respondent's mind, then it means you are likely to get wrong conclusions, because you'll get wrong answers from the questionnaire. So use clear and comprehensive wording which are understandable for all people at all levels of education. The other is use of correct grammar in wording. When you are choosing those words, make sure the spellings are correct, so that you don't give words that you don't mean. Like, you give the word as it is, so that the person can pick the right meaning and gives you the right response. Then the third one is use of statements that will be interpreted in the same way by respondents from different sample areas of the same population. Use of statements that will be interpreted in the same way by respondents from different sample areas of the same population. Of course, we know that when we are carrying out these questionnaires, or when we are trying to get the information, the primary data, we always sample our population, maybe using different sampling methods, as we shall look at them, the probabilistic and non-probabilistic sampling methods, as we shall look at them. You can group maybe respondents into different sections, and these sections, maybe they are homogeneous in nature, which we call the stratas, and then maybe you call each strata to represent a sample. But remember, all these people, they are from the same population. So even if because we group these stratas, maybe depending on the similarity, maybe they have some key items they have some or similar characteristics or attributes, then we group them together. We group those with slightly different attributes, then we call it maybe sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, sample 4, sample 5, depending on the population that we have. Now, what is going to happen is that when you are sending out these questionnaires, we make sure that we use statements that even when these people are actually in different sample spaces or sample sizes, or they are in different sample areas, they will interpret the same information in the same way throughout the entire population. Because if you don't do that, then you are going to end up having people who are going to misunderstand what you're trying to look at. Then the other one is assumptions about the respondents should not be made. You don't make your own assumptions about the population. You don't assume maybe these people maybe want this, these people maybe want this, or these people may respond to this. You don't make your own assumptions. That's why we said in the advantages that we don't have anything to do with personal bias. Even when you are biased on a given location or in a given maybe tribe or maybe sample, you don't make any assumptions. So assumptions about the respondents, about the respondents about the respondents should not be made. The assumptions about the respondents should not be made, meaning that the questions shouldn't be, they should be impersonal and non-aggressive. So you don't assume that maybe this population, this sample that I collected, these people are so aggressive, maybe I'm just going to use aggressive words. You don't make any assumptions. You serve the same information. The other is use of positive statements. So you avoid negative statements. So use of positive statements. Hence, avoiding the negative one. The negative ones. So you only use positive statements. Even when you are talking about something that you already have a personal judgment about, you make sure that when you are collecting the information, you don't let your perception or how you perceive the situation get into your way of drafting these questions. Then the other one, of course, items that contain more than one question per item should be avoided. For example, if you're asking a question, don't ask questions that are going to give the respondent hard time to respond to. Like for instance, I can ask, do you give your children fruits and meat? That question can actually call for different answers, or someone even skipping it, not answering that question, because I might be that parent who doesn't give my children maybe meat, but I give them fruits. But when you structured your question, you said, do you give your children fruits and meat? And in the answers you said yes or no. So what will the person answer? The person will end up answering no, yet one of it was true. So the ask one item at a time. Ask questions that give answers to one item at a time, and you avoid those that give two answers. So items that contain more than one question that contain more than one question per item should be avoided. Then the other is that use of only one aspect of the construct you are interested in per item. Use of only one aspect of the construct you are interested in per item. So use of only one aspect of the construct or one aspect of the question. One aspect of the construct you are interested in. You are interested in per item. So you don't ask even if the item brings the item has is maybe is having two aspects, or it can amount to two answers. You only ask what you are interested to know, so that you get exactly the information that you need to answer the research query that you have. The other one is anticipate of receiving open-ended answers from the respondent. You have to believe that you are going to get open-ended answers from the respondents. So anticipate of receiving open-ended answers from the respondents. So that's why the questions that we form or we structure, we always put multi choice questions, and most of the time these multiple choice questions, they are simple and open-minded. And of course, in the alternative questions, the respondents, we find ourselves, the respondent chooses among the alternatives. They can choose yes or no, they can choose true or false, while in those that are open-ended questions, the respondents are given maximum freedom in answering questions. For example, what are the causes of corruption? In a multi-choice question, the respondent chooses the best alternatives from the ones that they are given. Maybe the last one that we can talk about is that use of statements where respondents that have different opinions or traits will give different response. That have different opinions or traits will give different responses. So that's basically what we can talk about as far as the questionnaire is concerned. I've taken much more time explaining the I've taken much more time explaining the research questionnaire because I know it's one of the methods that we can use to collect information, especially from a very large population or a very large sample size. The other one that I want us to talk about is, let's talk about the statistical survey. Statistical survey, or what we call surveys. Now, what is a statistical survey? What is a statistical survey? Of course, this is maybe definition wise. Let's give the definition. This is a method. This is a method for collection or for collecting quantitative information, about items, quantitative information about items in a population, or these could actually be structured questionnaires distributed to individuals to gather mainly quantitative information. It could also be some qualitative aspect, but it's mainly the quantitative information. Examples, of course, if maybe we are looking at the student perspective or the students, we can maybe make a class survey asking peers about their favorite study method. It could be a group discussion or group work as a study method, or it could be solo, whereby you are studying alone. So that could be one of the survey that we can conduct. And the reason why we are conducting such is that we want to make sure that when we are giving students maybe courseworks, let them not lose some marks. Of course, there are students who can perform better when they are doing solo coursework, and there are those that can't perform well. So the reason that's why they are bringing these group courseworks and group assignments is to make sure that even those that don't actually pick up, maybe those who can't manage alone, they can pick some assistance from other fellows. Because most of these people, some of them, they don't want to be in those discussion groups and other kind of stuff. So we try to carry out a survey maybe to find out how many of the students maybe like such study survey of group, or they are solo reading. Of course, there are very many examples that we can benchmark on in terms of surveys. We've seen companies developing surveys and they distribute them to find out maybe how whether customers are satisfied with their products, or whether the customers are satisfied with their customer service. So we have seen most of those things happening. So it all depends on what you are trying to look at. But now I want us to give just maybe 2 or 3 advantages of statistical survey. So let's look at maybe the advantages first. Advantages of surveys. Of course, one of them we could have, it accommodates larger sample size. Because I've said, if let's say you are receiving a company survey about the service that you have received. Maybe they send you an email, they tell you, we are trying to carry out this survey, do you help us analyze how our customer service is, or the customer experience on how they are experiencing their service and all that. So it accommodates a large sample size, accommodates a larger sample size. It accommodates a larger sample size. Then the other one, it is also simple. It is very simple. It is simple. It is simple to conduct, because you can just give out a link, maybe on WhatsApp, different WhatsApp groups, or on your social media platforms, and people follow up and comment about how the product, maybe how they are finding the product, or how they are finding their customer experience, or even rating their products and all that. It is very simple. Then the other one is the response scale. The response rate, it scales. You find that if, let's say, I've said I can give a survey, and I'm just getting maybe response rate, and maybe I've given just ratings, whereby someone is just going to put maybe from 1 to 5. I've given you a 4, maybe I also give you an explanation as why I'm rating it 4. Others, they don't want even to rate to rate the service. So the response scales are always the same. Response scales are the same. Hence making it easy to compile data. So you find they are always saying you rate, and they always put those stars. They always put like 5 stars. Then you just rate. They are the same to all activities. If maybe you're asking about the customer experience, if you're asking about the customer products, if you're asking about your customer service, if you're asking about maybe the product that you want to introduce, you find that in all those options that you're trying to find information to, you always put these 5 stars for them to rate. So on all questions, you have the same response scale, that whereby someone can just pick a 5 throughout, and it gives you maybe 5 stars. So that's why we are saying the response scale, since it is the same, it makes it easy for us to compile data. Let's look at maybe the disadvantages. We give like 1 or 2. We also move to another one. So the demerits or the disadvantages of surveys. Number 1, misinterpretation of data results. Misinterpretation, because for you can see that the person rated us with the 5 stars, and you think your services are good. Misinterpretation of data results. Someone may rate you with a 5 star, yet it is just someone just did it, just picked, he didn't even read, he just picked, rated, and moved out. So it can be misinterpreted, whereby for you may think you are doing good, yet you should actually just improve your service. Then the other one is inappropriate use of data analysis procedures. Inappropriate use inappropriate use of data analysis procedures. That's also another disadvantage. Let's also look at the other aspect. We are now left with only two. If we talk about the direct observation and then interview, then the other one to do with something like experiment. That one you can try to research about it, but it's not all that much a one for experiment, because experiment most of the times it falls within these other methods. That's why I'm not going to talk about it. So let's look at the easiest one, which is direct personal observation. Direct personal observations. Here you observe the information by yourself. You go there, see the information. So this observation, definition wise, of course, we can say here the person watches or records the behaviors or the events in a natural setting. So the definition we can say the data is collected. The data is collected by direct the data is collected by direct personal interviews. Personal interviews. Of course, with this method, the researcher directly contacts the respondents, solicits for their cooperation. And enumerates the data. So most of the times it could be, because there is so much ways of how you can collect the information directly. You could just observe, you watch, you record the behaviors and events naturally. You just go into a random place, view what you have seen, take maybe some recordings of what is happening. You don't interact with anyone. You just collect this information by yourself. The other information would be the more professional one, whereby you contact the person directly. You have an interview with the person by the self, meaning it is the researcher and the respondent. Because if the information is going to, maybe you are going to collect information from parliament, of course you look at maybe who to contact, maybe the speaker. Then you go there, you ask for their appropriate time, they give you the time, then you ask what you wanted to ask if they have given you the time to get the information that you wanted. So, but if you are going maybe to just cut out, maybe you just go into an area, see what is happening, then report based on what you have seen. So you can observe, maybe one example that we can look at, if maybe we are lecturers and we are trying to look at how students study, maybe towards exams, we can maybe try to identify who are those students, or how many students are actually going into maybe the library for reading. We can be able to monitor how students go into the libraries and what they do when they are in the libraries. We try to see whether they are actually reading or they are just relaxing. But we go there, we don't ask them, we just go, we don't engage, we just watch them. But it is also a problem, because you see, when you go into maybe the library and maybe you try to move around, they will notice the pattern that this person always comes here, maybe is up to something. So your presence may affect the information you are going to collect, because they may see you and they start pretending that they are actually reading. So the best way to do a direct observation is maybe in the school compound or at the different resting places. You just pass by. They are just ordinary places where any person can pass, and no one is going to get suspicious of what you're trying to see. Then as you pass by, you also get to analyze the situation, that actually when students are actually at maybe the resting centers or the cafeterias, they're actually reading or they are doing their own thing. So that will make you make a decision based on what you have seen. So it is you to capture the real time things as they are happening. So maybe we can talk about like 4 or 5 advantages, and then the disadvantages. Then we proceed to the interview as another form of data collection. So let's look at the advantages. Advantages of observations. Personal observations. Observation as a method of data collection. One, it is simple. The method is simple to administer. It is simple to administer, because you don't need anything. You just, even if you are just on your own things, you can actually get information. So it is very simple. So with this method, the other one is that with this method, the researcher and the respondents are present at the time of data collection. So you get a real-time analysis. So both the researcher and the respondent, both the researcher and the respondent are available at the time of data collection. At the time of data collection. Maybe you have contacted them on phone and now they have come, you have met physically. So there is that physical touch or physical feel. Then the other one, this method is more accurate. The method is more accurate. The method is more accurate. It is more accurate because this data is going to be collected personally by the researcher. So it is more accurate, hence more reliable information. More reliable information because of data being collected by the researcher personally. The second last we can talk about, it is suitable for all types of respondents. Everyone feels comfortable when you approach them and you ask them to have maybe some interviews on a certain aspect. You meet them, they get that personal connection with you or with the researcher. So it is suitable for all types of respondents, whether educated or not. Then the last one maybe we can talk about is the data record is also accurate. Data recorded is accurate. Why is it so? Is because when you have maybe not had something and maybe you had not written it, the respondent can repeat it in real time, not by these questionnaires whereby you take up a callback and they forget what they had even talked about or what they had filled. So here you get real time information, meaning that you are going to record the information as it is in its accurate form. So let's look at the demerits or the disadvantages. Demerits of observation as a method of primary data collection. One, the data may be inaccurate and inefficient in case the researcher is inexperienced. So it bases on the quality of the research, bases on the quality of the researcher. So it bases on the experience and the skills of the researcher. Once the researcher is inexperienced, he doesn't have more experience, he doesn't even know how to handle personal interviews, he doesn't even know how to get information, which questions to ask the respondent so that they can get the best out of the respondent. If maybe the respondents are short-tempered, if maybe they are dishonest to themselves, maybe they are biased. So it all bases on the experience of the researcher. Then, of course, it is costly. Just imagine if I want information about United States and I have to look for Mr. Trump. What will happen? It will be very expensive for me to meet him in the first place. I may not actually meet him. So even when I do my best to meet him, I can meet him, but the cost. So that's why we are saying it is costly. It is quite costly. Then it is time consuming. It is time consuming. Just imagine if I want a yes or no answer from someone and I have to move to them physically or to meet them physically. It will be more consuming in terms of time. Even it takes more time for me to interview the person and I get the information that I want. And themselves, they have also to spend more time on interviews, which they would have not spent more time on if they were maybe interviewed on phone. Then the other one is, it is only effective when the scope of inquiry is small. If you are asking about something that is very huge, you can't meet every person. If you are doing research about maybe poverty levels in Uganda, you can't meet everyone in Uganda. So what you are going to do, you are going to maybe to distribute, and then you sample the population, you distribute questionnaires and they fill out, then you get the information. That's why you are finding that we have challenges with the population census, because everyone is supposed to be met. And even when they try their best to meet each and every person, they can reach maybe at some people's places, and they find when the people are not there. And because of time, they may not say we are coming back. So they end up not being counted. So it is only effective. It is only effective when the scope of inquiry, is only effective when the scope of inquiry is small, or when it is going to be dealing with a small issue. So let's finalize with the interview as our last method of data correction in primary data. So this is the process. An interview, this is the process. This is the process that involves individuals. That involve individuals that involve asking individuals. It involves asking individuals. It involves asking individuals. It involves asking individuals. Asking individuals. It involves asking individuals the required information. The required information. It involves asking the individuals the required information. So we have you engage with other people and then you ask. So we have different types. There are types of interviews. We have types of interviews. We have those that are one-on-one, one-to-one interview. One-to-one interview. So it's either face-to-face, it's either face-to-face interview, or it can be through a telephone. It can be telephone interview. So this happens when you are just with one person. One person is calling, the other one is receiving. That is a one-to-one interview. Or we can be meeting physically, maybe through video conferencing like Zoom, WhatsApp chats, and all that. Or we can be on phone. Then the other one The second type is it can be a one-to-many interview. For example, if let's say you are doing a meeting, you are one person, maybe you are the chairperson and you are chairing a meeting with other people. You get their response, they ask you questions, you respond. So it can be one person presenting to a group of individuals. Maybe they are receiving information, maybe it's a graduation, and maybe they are receiving speeches from maybe the different heads of departments, and so it is one person speaking at a time to very many people. So of course the advantages that are going to be here, they are the same like these other advantages. First-hand information, you get to clarify some of the things in real time. They are more the same like the personal interviews. But we can maybe look at some of the disadvantages, maybe like 2 or 1. Disadvantages of interview or interviewing. Of course, we can see some of these maybe when the HR or human resource departments or human resource people are interviewing people, they are trying to get the information to see whether they can actually hire them or they shouldn't. So those are some of the things, the examples that we can use. So one, the information can be inaccurate or false. Data may be given to the interviewer. Because for this interview, you are not seeing this information directly, but you are asking. You ask a question, then someone responds. Someone can choose to give you a wrong answer. So it all depends on it all depends on you. Because one of the reasons why you may receive false information, it may be maybe you may misunderstand. It could be out of misunderstanding the question. Maybe you have asked the question and I have not understood the question, so I've given you a wrong information, and you also don't know that I didn't actually understand the question. Then the other one is it could be forgetfulness. I may forget. Forgetfulness. I may forget the information, then I end up giving you information that is not right, but I wasn't sure. I just forgot maybe the rightful information, and I gave you what I thought was right. It could be actually a deliberate effort. It could be a deliberate effort or intent to mislead. A deliberate intent to mislead. Someone can give you the information and he wants you to get wrong information, especially if you are talking about, maybe if you come to capture information relating to maybe politics, and someone is already biased. He can gives you wrong information or a sarcastic information where you can't even make any decision out of it. So there are so many chances of you getting false data. The other one, the second one we can talk about, if the number of interviewers are employed, then they may record answers in the same way as the investigators themselves would have. Because if you employ me to capture some information and maybe there is no kind of independence, I may not give you a honest response. So those are some of the things that I wanted us to look at as far as this topic of primary data is concerned. I wanted us to go deep into an understanding of it. Now, remember, we have been talking about the types of data, and the one we have just completed was the primary data. Now, I told you the two major categories of data. The two major categories, I told it was discrete and continuous. Then I told you the second one was primary and secondary data. Now, we have looked at the primary data, but we have not yet looked at the secondary data. We need also to understand where can we get the secondary data. What are some of the advantages of having secondary data as opposed to having a primary data? So the next thing that we are going to look at in the next video, we are going to talk about the secondary data. Secondary data. So let me meet you in the next video as we are talking about secondary data.